We're going to look today at the edit mode in Blender. Um, Edit so we can manipulate meshes and create new geometry to what we want rather than using one of the primitive shapes. So I'm going to start off by adding a mesh. So I can come to here, add mesh, or the shortcut is Shift A, and I'm going to add a plane. Okay. Incidentally, you'll see I've put my keystrokes down here in the corner, so if I press the spacebar, for example, it'll show up. Might make it a bit easier to follow on. Alright, so I've got this plane, and let's tab into edit mode with the tab key. So what is in a mesh? Well, there's kind of three components that make up the mesh. The first is this little orange dot, which is a vertex. So we can select a vertex, we can grab it with the G key, move it around, or we can use the move tool to get our arrows and kind of move it where we want it. Let me Control Z back. So the vertex is kind of like the corner of every face. Okay, we've got a vertex select up here. We've also got an edge select, so if I was to select one of these edges, it runs between two vertices. And then we've got our face select, so if I was to select the face, okay, you'll swap a lot between these. Now there is a keyboard shortcut for switching these, which is the numbers above your key, above your letters. 1 for vertex, 2 for edge, and 3 for face. Okay, let me go back to vertex. So we can select one, we can shift select 2 or more, and we can grab, move, shrink. So grab them back like that. Move, we can select the move tool and use arrows. We can do the other operations like we discussed last week, such as shrink or scale, to scale them in closer together. And in edit mode we also have a whole load of other options down here, so we're going to be going through these. Okay, now a plane is pretty much a plane. It's just one flat face. What can we do with it? Well, we can start to shape it, to add to it, and create and mold it. So for example, if I went to face select mode, or not face select, to edge select mode, and I selected this edge here, I can extrude this edge, drag a new edge out from it with the E key. So E, and I'm just going to press Y to bring it along the Y axis, and you can see I'm making a new edge, a new face here by extruding that edge. I can do that again, E, Y. I need to do that with my mouse in the keyport, in the viewport, and I can extrude that edge. I can extrude it in other directions, E, Z or Z, depending where you are in the world. E, Y, and I can bring it backwards to kind of match up with that one. E, Y again. Let's do that once more, E, Y again. Now if I wanted to join this up, I know it's not square, but that doesn't matter. I could E and grab and move and try and match this up. Okay, I'm going to press escape because I don't want to do that. But another way to make this face here is to select this edge. It's already selected. Shift select this edge and press the F key, F for face, and it will make a face there. Okay, I could close this box up doing the same thing. Select two of these edges here, make a face, select two, make a face. Now why am I selecting 2 and not 3? Well, no particular reason really. Yes there is. Let me see if, no there isn't. But selecting opposite faces, if I was to select adjacent edges, if I was to select adjacent edges and make a face, I would make a triangle. I don't want that. I want a quad. It's always best to model in quads. We'll go into the reasons why later. Okay, so I can select these two, make a face, Let me come around the other side and do the same on this side. Select these two and make a face. This one and this one and make a face. This one and this one, make a face. Okay. So from this simple plane, we've made this kind of elongated box. It's not very square and stuff. Can we do something about that? We probably can. So this end is quite accentuated, the angle it's at. Let me grab these, or not grab, select these two edges. And if I wanted them the same in the Y plane, I could SY 0. Something happened there with my mesh being wrong. I'm not sure why. SY 0. Because I was messing about with those other edges when I was selecting 3, and I didn't resolve that correctly. So not a problem. Let's quickly go to face mode. Select. It seems to be this space here. That's the problem. Let me delete that with the X key. I'll delete that face. Okay. And I've also got an extra face here. Alright, that's better. So let me go back into Edge Select. Let me select this one, and just to re-demonstrate that, let's move that outer line. Okay, I sometimes get lost in my own tutorials. It's demonstrating stuff and I forget what I've done. Anyway, to get these even, we'd select the first edge, shift select the second edge, SY 0, and what it's done is it's brought both these edges in line. Okay, I could do the same with these two edges. SY 0. I can make sure these are in line. SY 0. And similarly with the last two. SY 0. Okay, so we know that this boxes, the faces are perfectly right angular because we've squared them all up against each other. Okay, I never put a face on this end one, so let me quickly do that and press F for face. There we go. Alright, so that's extruding geometry. There's other ways we can create geometry, and if we look down here, we've got quite a few different options here. So this first button is actually to extrude, the shortcut of E. So once again, with this face selected, I could press this button and I could click and drag along the Y. Let me say Y. Okay. I thought that would extrude, it didn't, and it says extrude. Extrude region. Let me try that again. Or let me try that with vertex select. Extrude. There we go. We've got this little manipulator here. Let's pull this along and press the Y button to keep it constrained to the Y axis. Okay. I mustn't have pressed that or something. Alright. The next one we've got here is inset faces. Okay, so if I was to select a face, let's say this large face here. Let me go to face select. And this one, select this face. If I was to click and drag, there we go. I started very close to the cursor. So let me Control Z backwards and explain that. When you're using these tools, it's better if your cursor is further away. It gives you more control. Okay, so I've got that one inset selected. If I bring my mouse over here, click and drag, you can see how it's creating new geometry. It's created actually 4 new faces, and this allows us to select this face and maybe grab it on the Z axis and bring it up a bit, I could maybe inset that again, so click and drag. I could grab on the Z-axis and bring it up, and we can start to create shapes that way. Okay, another tool we got below this is the bevel tool, and what the bevel tool will do is it will add more geometry around to kind of round these corners, these selected corners off. So let's try that. Let me bevel and pull it out. You see it's adding more geometry, so kind of rounding that off. Okay, but that's looking very square. But if we open up our operator panel here, we'll see we've got some options. So outer miter sharp, patch arc. I'm not too sure about this. This is new, but nonetheless, the one we're interested in here is segments. If we were to increase the segments, we'd add more segments and make this rounder. Okay, we've also got a profile slider here which will bias it towards one side or the other. At the minute it's at 0.5, which is biased half one way, half the other. Watch as I slide. We can even make the concave kind of shape here, whereas 0.5 is convex, but if I bring it further, it's biasing it more towards the top. Okay, so let's bring it down to about 0.5. Which is the default. The rest of these we'll get into later on. The one you're really worried about at the minute, or need to be concerned about, is the segments and possibly the profile, depending on what you're doing. Or let's shrink this up. Okay, now let's say we're working on this section here. And we've made this basic shape, but we decided we needed another set of edges across the center of that. We can make what's called a loop cut, which is the next tool. Okay, so that's a loop cut, and what a loop cut will do is, if you notice where I bring my mouse close to an edge, it shows where it can make new loops, new geometry. Basically cut that in half, a loop cut. Okay, so do that here. Okay, so I can click on that edge, and if I extend my operator panel, we've got a number of cuts, so I can add more than 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever I want. I'm going to leave it at 1 for now. Okay, so if I come back into my select tool now, I can see, you can see I've cut this segment completely in half. So once again, I could rather than select the face, because I'm already in edge select, I could select these 4 edges and maybe do a bevel, which is a shortcut of Control B. But I've still got it's going to look odd because I've still got all these segments. Okay, or I could do an inset, which is I, and start to create geometry where I need it. So let's look at the last couple of tools that we're going to be using for now. We're not covering all the tools, just the ones we need. We got a knife cut here. A knife cut can be useful for adding, let me select that, for adding edges where you didn't have them, where you may want them. So for example, if my knife tool selected, if I click on this edge here, you see I've got a green dot. Okay, if I come over, and you can see it snap into this edge over here, which is great. Okay, so I've clicked on that again, and then I can press enter. Okay, and what you'll see here is I've added another edge. Okay, be careful with this, because if we look, we said we really always want to model in quads. If I was to go into vertex select and well, let's go into face select and select this face up here. Let me get my select tool, select this face up here. Okay. If I then go into vertex select and we count, we've actually got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertices. This is no longer a quad. It's actually a pentagon, a 5-sided face, but because these are in line, it looks like a quad, but it's not actually. This can mess with some modifiers and stuff later, but we'll go into that later. It's just something we need to be aware of. Let's Control Z backwards to get rid of that edge. There we go. Alright, so using that knife tool, let's make sure it's selected. There it is. I could feasibly cut a hole into this face. Okay, so I'm going to select there and press enter. Okay, you'll see it's created some new geometry as well to accommodate this. However, let me select this face, go to face select this face. I could delete this face, okay, leaving this hole in my geometry if that's what I wanted to do. It's not what I want to do, so I'm just going to Control Z backwards again. There we go. So that's the knife tool. Poly build we'll get to later on. That's more to do with retopology and stuff. Spin tool gets a little complicated. That'll be a lesson on its own. However, this one, to sphere or smooth, flatten angles of selected vertices. Okay. Well, let's select all. Select this tool. Okay. And my blender just crashed. Okay, 1 second. Okay, unfortunately crashes do happen occasionally, and I'm also running screen recording software and things like that, so my computer gets a little bit taxed. So I've quickly rebuilt something similar. Doesn't really matter. We're just showing some of the tools. The tool I was going to demonstrate was this smooth tool. So with everything selected, if I start to bring this, you can see how it's going to expand or contract the all the vertices, and it's making a slightly different shape. So maybe it's something you can use while modeling. For example, let me just try this. If I was to select kind of these three, then use my smooth tool, you can see how I can affect by resizing some of the mesh. Right, okay. The final tool I want to talk about is the edge slide, which is here. Sometimes we only want to slide an edge around. So say this edge, we want to move it more up this way. Okay, so with the edge slide tool, I can grab the edge and move it along, slide it along the adjacent edges. Okay, there are a couple of other tools, but we'll get to them. They're a bit more advanced. We'll get to them at another time. One thing I did want to point out, and certainly Photoshop users be familiar with this, when we look at our tools, some of them have this tiny little triangle in the corner. This means that there is more than one kind of tool nested in there. So for example, if we look at this extrude region, if we press and hold the button, we can see we've got extrude region along normals, extrude individual, extrude to cursor. So we've got options, and same certainly with some of the others. Alright, so that is the basics of a mesh. A mesh comprises of vertices, edges and faces, and we can move these around and create and extrude and start to build up some custom shapes that we want rather than using one of the primitive shapes.